The metal chair crashed against the marble base of the Virgin Mary statue with a sound that echoed through St. Anthony's elementary chapel like thunder. 12-year-old Marcus Williams stood frozen, his knuckles white around the chair legs, tears of rage streaming down his face. He had come here to destroy something beautiful because everything beautiful in his life had already been destroyed. But the moment the chair made contact with the sacred statue, something happened that defied every law of physics and reason. The statue didn't crack, it didn't chip, it didn't even tremble. Instead, a warmth spread through the metal chair, up through Marcus's hands and directly into his heart, a warmth so profound and unexpected that he dropped the chair and staggered backward, gasping. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, heavy with presence, as if the very air had become sacred. Marcus's anger didn't just disappear. It transformed into something else entirely, something that made him fall to his knees before the statue he had just tried to destroy. Sister Catherine found him there 20 minutes later, still kneeling, his face wet with tears that were no longer born of rage, but of something he couldn't name. The chapel smelled faintly of roses, though no flowers bloomed anywhere in the building. The statue stood unmarked, its serene marble face gazing down with the same compassionate expression it had worn for over 50 years. Before we go deeper into this mystery, take a moment to subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries. Stories like this are too powerful to experience alone. And as you hear this story unfold, I want you to comment below where you're watching from and share these words. Sacred protection surrounds us. Let's create a prayer chain that spans the globe. What Marcus didn't know, what no one at St. Anthony's could have imagined, was that his moment of deepest fury had awakened something extraordinary. That night, as he lay in his bed in the cramped apartment he shared with his exhausted mother and two younger sisters, Marcus began to dream. But these weren't ordinary dreams. In vivid, impossible detail, he saw his classmates, Jenny Martinez reaching for a loose stair railing, Tommy Chen choking on his lunch, Sarah Kim walking toward a patch of ice that would send her tumbling. Each dream felt more real than reality itself, accompanied by a gentle voice that spoke with the same warmth he had felt through the metal chair. By morning, Marcus understood with terrifying clarity that something had changed forever. The statue he had tried to break in a moment of blind rage had somehow chosen him, marked him, transformed his anger into something that could save lives. But as he walked back towards St. Anthony's Elementary that crisp October morning, one question burned in his mind with an intensity that made his hands shake. If the Virgin Mary could turn his fury into a gift of protection, what else was she planning to do through a broken 12-year-old boy who had nothing left to lose? Marcus Williams had learned to count time in evictions. The first came when he was 8, 3 days' notice taped to their apartment door like a death sentence. The third eviction notice arrived 6 months ago. The same week, his father walked out forever, leaving behind unpaid bills and a family that suddenly had to survive on the wages of a woman working 3 jobs. Carmen Williams cleaned office buildings from midnight to 6, stocked shelves at the grocery store during the day, and spent her evenings watching other people's children to earn enough for rent that seemed to increase every month. Marcus watched his mother's hands crack from industrial cleaning supplies, saw her fall asleep, standing against the kitchen counter, witnessed her count and recount the same $23 in her wallet, as if prayer could multiply it. When she thought her children weren't looking, he caught her whispering desperate pleas to a small Virgin Mary picture she kept hidden in her bedroom dresser, the only religious item his father hadn't mocked before abandoning them. The Virgin Mary statue at St. Anthony's Elementary had stood in the chapel for over 60 years, donated by the Benedetti family when their son survived polio against all medical predictions. Carved from Carrara marble in Italy, it depicted the Mother of God, with hands extended in welcome, her face bearing an expression of profound love that generations of children had brought their fears and hopes to lay at her feet. Students' grandparents had prayed before this same statue during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Their parents had sought comfort here during September 11th. For decades, the statue had been a beacon of hope in a world that often felt hopeless. But to Marcus, the statue represented every empty promise he had ever been told. If Mary was supposed to protect families, why was his broken? If she answered prayers, why did his mother work herself to exhaustion while other kids' parents drove expensive cars? Every morning for 6 months, Marcus had to walk past that chapel, past that serene marble face that seemed to mock his pain with its peaceful expression. The other students still believed. They still lit candles, still whispered innocent prayers about test grades and playground disputes. But Marcus had stopped believing the day his father's absence proved that some prayers fall on deaf ears. The anger had been building for months, fed by every unpaid bill, every worried phone call from creditors, every night he heard his mother crying through thin walls. Yesterday, when Jenny Martinez casually mentioned her family's vacation to Disney World, something inside Marcus finally snapped. The rage that followed wasn't just about Jenny's privilege. It was about everything he had lost, everything he would never have, and the statue that had watched it all happen in silence. But what Marcus couldn't have known was that his fury had been heard, not ignored, not dismissed, but received as a prayer of the most desperate kind. And what was about to unfold would prove that sometimes the Virgin Mary's answers come disguised as the very miracles we're too hurt to recognize. That first night after the chapel incident, Marcus lay in his narrow bed, listening to the sounds that had become the soundtrack of his life. His mother's muffled sobs through paper-thin walls, the neighbor's television blaring infomercials, the distant wail of sirens. But as exhaustion finally pulled him towards sleep, something extraordinary began to unfold behind his closed eyelids. The dream came with a clarity that felt more real than waking life. He stood in the second-floor hallway of St. Anthony's Elementary, watching Jenny Martinez climb the stairs during lunch break. She was laughing with her friend Sophia, completely unaware that 3 steps from the top, her hand would reach instinctively for the ornate wooden railing that had graced the school for decades. In the dream, Marcus could see what Jenny couldn't. The decorative post had worked loose, held in place by nothing more than paint. The moment her weight shifted against it, the railing would give way, sending her tumbling backward down 15 concrete steps. But what made Marcus wake up gasping wasn't just the vision of Jenny's fall, it was the voice that accompanied it. Gentle, unmistakably feminine, speaking with the same warmth he had felt through the metal chair. "She will be hurt badly unless you act," the voice whispered. "This is how love protects what it cherishes." Marcus bolted upright, his heart hammering against his ribs. The digital clock beside his bed glowed 3:17 a.m., and the apartment had fallen silent, except for his youngest sister's breathing across the room. He pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to convince himself it had been nothing more than a vivid nightmare. But the image of Jenny reaching for that loose railing remained burned in his memory with photographic precision, complete with details he had never noticed: the tiny crack in the post's base, the way morning light would hit the hallway. When morning came, Marcus walked to school in a daze, the dream replaying endlessly in his mind. During first period math, he found himself staring at Jenny 3 rows ahead, wondering if he was losing his sanity. By third period English, he had made a decision that terrified him. He would follow Jenny to the stairs and see if his impossible dream held truth. At exactly 12:20 p.m., as students flooded the hallways for lunch, Marcus positioned himself near the second-floor staircase. His palms were sweating, his stomach churning with dread, when Jenny and Sophia appeared at the bottom of the stairs. Laughing about their teacher's comment, Marcus felt time slow. If this story is pulling you in, subscribe now and tell me in the comments what you believe is really happening. Your insight might reveal something we haven't seen yet. Jenny climbed the stairs with the carefree bounce of a 12-year-old who had never known real danger. Sophia followed close behind, still giggling. And as they reached the 13th step, just as the dream had shown him, Jenny's hand moved instinctively toward the railing for support. Marcus didn't think, he acted, lunging forward and grabbing Jenny's wrist just as her fingers brushed the decorative post. "Don't touch that!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the hallway. But even as the words left his mouth, Marcus realized he was about to discover just how impossible his dream had really been. Jenny Martinez stared at Marcus with wide, startled eyes, her wrist still trapped in his grip. "Marcus, what are you—" she began, but her words were cut off by a sound that made both girls freeze in terror. The ornate wooden post that Jenny had been reaching toward suddenly gave way with a sharp crack, the entire railing section tilting dangerously toward the stairwell. If Marcus hadn't grabbed her wrist at that exact moment, she would have plummeted backward down 15 concrete steps. Sophia screamed. Other students in the hallway stopped and stared as the broken railing hung at an impossible angle. Marcus released Jenny's wrist, his hands trembling as he stared at the destruction that had been prevented. The voice in his dream had been right. Every impossible detail had been exactly as he'd seen it. "How did you know?" Jenny whispered, her face pale as she realized how close she'd come to serious injury. Marcus couldn't answer. He couldn't explain that he'd seen it in a dream that felt more real than reality. Couldn't tell her about the gentle voice that had warned him. Instead, he mumbled something about noticing the post looked loose and hurried away, leaving Jenny and Sophia staring after him in bewildered amazement. By day's end, news of the incident had spread throughout St. Anthony's Elementary like wildfire. Students whispered in corners about Marcus Williams, the angry boy who had somehow prevented a terrible accident. Teachers exchanged worried glances, wondering how a 12-year-old could have detected structural damage that had escaped professional notice. That night, as Marcus lay in his narrow bed, the dreams came again. This time he found himself standing in the school's basement, watching the elderly janitor, Mr. Rodriguez, organizing cleaning supplies. Marcus had never spoken to Mr. Rodriguez beyond polite greetings, knew nothing about the man's personal life or medical history, but in the dream he watched in horror as the janitor suddenly clutched his chest, his face growing pale, his breathing becoming labored. The gentle voice spoke again. "His blood sugar is dangerously low. He will collapse within minutes. Only you can guide them to him in time." Marcus woke with the same clarity and certainty he'd felt before Jenny's near accident. The urgency was even greater, and the timing was about to test everyone's faith. The next morning, during second period math, Mrs. Patterson was explaining fractions when Marcus suddenly stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Marcus, is something wrong?" she asked, her voice carrying concern and mild irritation. "Mr. Rodriguez," Marcus said, his voice tight with urgency. "We need to check on Mr. Rodriguez right now. He's in the basement storage room and something's very wrong." The classroom fell silent. Mrs. Patterson set down her marker, her expression shifting from irritation to confusion. "Marcus, what are you talking about? How could you possibly know?" "Please," Marcus interrupted, something in his tone making several classmates lean forward in their seats. "We have to go now. He needs help immediately." But what Mrs. Patterson was about to discover would force her to confront a question that would haunt her for months. How could a 12-year-old student know that a man he barely knew was lying unconscious in a basement room, fighting for his life? Mrs. Patterson stared at Marcus for a long moment, her mind racing through possibilities that all seemed impossible. Against every rational instinct she possessed, something in the boy's desperate urgency convinced her to act. "Class, continue working on problems 12 through 15, she announced, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll be back in a few minutes." She led Marcus down the hallway toward the basement stairs, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. "Marcus, if this is some kind of joke," she began. But he cut her off with a shake of his head so vehement it made her words die in her throat. They found Mr. Rodriguez exactly where Marcus had said he would be, collapsed on the cold concrete floor of the storage room, unconscious, his face an alarming shade of grey. Mrs. Patterson gasped and immediately called 911 while Marcus knelt beside the janitor, his small hand gently touching the man's shoulder. The paramedics arrived within minutes, confirming what Marcus had somehow impossibly known: a severe diabetic emergency that could have been fatal if not discovered in time. Word of the second incident spread even faster than the first. By lunch, every teacher in St. Anthony's Elementary knew about Marcus Williams and his impossible knowledge. By evening, concerned parents were calling the school office demanding explanations. And by the following morning, Principal Sister Catherine had Marcus sitting in her office, his mother Carmen beside him, both facing questions that had no rational answers. "Mrs. Williams," Sister Catherine began carefully, her weathered hands folded on the desk before her, "I'm sure you understand why we need to discuss Marcus's recent insights." Carmen Williams looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed from another sleepless night. "I don't understand any of this," she whispered. "My son is a good boy, but he's not. He doesn't have any special abilities. This is all so impossible." But even as Carmen spoke those words, Marcus was receiving his third warning. That morning, as he walked past the cafeteria on his way to class, the familiar tingling sensation washed over him. The gentle voice spoke with increasing urgency. "The gas connection behind the large oven is failing. In 20 minutes, it will create a dangerous leak. The lunch preparation will begin soon. You must act now." Marcus's stomach clenched with dread. Each warning had been more public than the last, each intervention harder to explain away as coincidence. But as he stood outside Sister Catherine's office door, knowing his mother was inside trying to defend the impossible, he realized he had no choice. He burst through the office door without knocking, his face pale with urgency. "Sister Catherine, you have to evacuate the kitchen right now. There's a gas leak behind the main oven, and it's about to get very dangerous." Both women turned to stare at him in stunned silence. Carmen's face went white. Sister Catherine's expression shifted from confusion to something approaching alarm, not at the warning itself, but at the calm certainty with which this 12-year-old boy had delivered it. "Marcus," Sister Catherine said slowly, "how could you possibly know that?" But before he could answer, the fire alarm began to wail throughout the building, and they all realized that this time Marcus's impossible knowledge was about to be tested in front of the entire school. The fire department arrived at St. Anthony's Elementary within 6 minutes, their heavy boots echoing through hallways as students filed out in orderly lines. The gas inspector confirmed what Marcus had warned: a dangerous leak behind the main kitchen oven that could have caused an explosion during lunch preparation. By the all clear, every parent, teacher, and student knew that Marcus Williams had somehow prevented a catastrophic disaster. That evening, Carmen Williams sat at their small kitchen table, staring at the stack of unpaid bills. Her hands shook as she held a final notice for their electric service, the numbers blurring through her tears. 3 impossible warnings in 4 days. Her son knowing things that defied explanation. The whispers and stares from other parents who looked at Marcus like he was some kind of miracle worker, or worse, something to be feared. "Mom?" Marcus appeared in the doorway, still wearing his school clothes, his face etched with exhaustion that no 12-year-old should carry. "We need to talk." Carmen set down the bill and looked at her son, really looked at him for the first time in days. When had his eyes become so serious? When had he started carrying himself like someone bearing an impossible weight? "Marcus, I don't understand what's happening," she whispered. "People are calling you gifted, saying you have some supernatural ability. The school wants to bring in specialists to study you. I don't know how to protect you." Marcus pulled out a chair and sat across from her, his small hands clasped tightly. "Mom, do you remember the Virgin Mary picture in your bedroom, the one you pray to sometimes when you think I can't hear you?" Carmen's breath caught. She had thought she was being quiet during those desperate midnight prayers, pleading for help with bills, for her children's safety, for strength to face another day alone. "The lady in that picture," Marcus continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's the same one who talks to me in my dreams, the same one whose statue I tried to break in the chapel that day." Carmen felt the world tilt around her. "What do you mean, talks to you?" "Ever since that day when I hit the statue with the chair, she comes to me in dreams. She shows me things, dangerous things that are about to happen to people I care about. She tells me how to help, how to warn them." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "I tried to destroy her statue because I was angry that Dad left us. Angry that you work so hard and we still can't pay our bills. But instead of being mad at me, she chose me to help protect people." Carmen stared at her son, her mind reeling. The boy who had been consumed by rage was describing divine intervention with calm certainty of someone who had experienced the impossible. Marcus reached across the table and took her hands. "Mom, she wanted me to tell you something else. She said your prayers haven't been forgotten, and that help is coming in ways you won't expect." Carmen Williams, who hadn't truly prayed in months, suddenly found herself believing in miracles again. But was her son's gift a blessing, or something that would tear their already fragile family apart forever? The fourth miracle came 3 days later. During the morning that would test everyone's faith beyond anything they thought possible, Marcus had barely slept, the dreams coming more frequently now, more urgent. The gentle voice had shown him something so terrifying that he'd woken up screaming, causing his mother to rush into his room at 4 a.m. But when she asked what he'd seen, Marcus could only shake his head and whisper, "School buses, children, something terrible is going to happen." By 8:15 that morning, 32 students from grades 3 through 6 had lined up beside bus 47 for their field trip to the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. It was supposed to be a day of wonder and learning, carefully planned for weeks. Mrs. Patterson checked her list twice, while Sister Catherine made final safety announcements. The driver, Mr. Chen, a gentleman who had been transporting St. Anthony's students safely for over 15 years, completed his standard pre-trip inspection and found nothing unusual. Marcus stood at his classroom window on the second floor, watching the scene below with mounting terror. The dream had been crystal clear. Bus 47 would make it exactly 2 miles before the brake lines. Weakened by a tiny leak that had gone undetected, would fail completely. The bus would barrel through the stop sign at the bottom of the steep hill on Maple Street, directly into the path of the morning commuter traffic. His hands pressed against the window glass as Sister Catherine raised her hand to signal the driver. In 15 seconds, those children would board the bus. In 20 minutes, if Marcus did nothing, 32 innocent lives would be in mortal danger. "Sister Catherine!" Marcus shouted from the window, his voice cracking with desperation. "Stop! Don't let them get on the bus!" Every face in the courtyard turned upward toward his voice. Sister Catherine shielded her eyes against the morning sun, her expression shifting from confusion to concern as she recognized the urgency in Marcus's tone. "Marcus, what's wrong?" she called back. "The brakes!" Marcus's voice carried across the courtyard with an authority that made even the chattering students fall silent. "The brake system is failing. If they get on that bus, they'll all be hurt." For a moment, the entire courtyard froze. The parents who had come to see their children off stared up at the 12-year-old boy whose previous warnings had proven impossibly accurate. Mr. Chen's hand hesitated on the door lever. The children looked between Marcus and their principal with growing confusion. Sister Catherine faced an impossible decision. Every rational instinct told her to proceed with the carefully planned trip. But 3 times in 1 week, this boy had known things that saved lives. 3 times she had witnessed the impossible. "Step away from the bus," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had made peace with trusting in miracles. Everyone step back. But as the maintenance crew arrived to inspect bus 47, and as Marcus's 4th impossible warning was about to be proven true once again, none of them realized they were about to discover something that would change not just their understanding of Marcus's gift, but their faith in the very nature of divine intervention itself. The brake inspection confirmed what Marcus had seen in his terrifying dream. The hydraulic line had developed a microscopic fracture that would have caused complete brake failure within exactly 2 miles, right at the steepest part of Maple Street, where the bus would have been unable to stop. The mechanic who conducted the inspection, a 30-year veteran named Frank Morales, stood beside Sister Catherine with trembling hands as he explained that this type of failure was nearly impossible to detect during routine checks, but absolutely catastrophic when it occurred. "Sister," Frank said quietly, "in all my years, I've never seen anything like this. That boy didn't just save those children from an accident, he saved them from what would have been a tragedy that made national news." Word of the fourth miracle spread beyond St. Anthony's Elementary within hours. Local news stations arrived by afternoon, interviewing parents whose children had been scheduled for that bus ride. The story reached social media, where it was shared thousands of times under hashtags like "La Miracle Child" and "Divine Intervention." But for Marcus, the attention felt like a weight growing heavier with each passing day. That evening, the Williams family did something they hadn't done since his father left. They prayed together. Carmen had purchased a small Virgin Mary statue from the church gift shop, placing it on their kitchen table, surrounded by 2 flickering candles. Marcus's younger sisters, 8-year-old Sophia and 10-year-old Elena, knelt beside their mother and brother, their small hands clasped in prayer as Carmen whispered words of gratitude for the protection that had been granted through her son. "Marcus," Carmen said softly as they finished their prayers, "I need to ask you something important. When you talk to her, when the Virgin Mary speaks to you in your dreams, what does she feel like?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the gentle flame dancing atop the votive candle. "She feels like forgiveness, Mom. Like the kind of love that doesn't need you to be perfect to receive it. She feels like the opposite of everything I was angry about." But as the family shared this moment of sacred peace, Marcus didn't tell them about the final dream that had come to him the night before. A dream unlike all the others. This time, the gentle voice had spoken not of danger to prevent, but of something far more mysterious. She had shown him the school chapel filled with golden light, the statue he had once tried to destroy, now surrounded by hundreds of people from the community. In the dream, the Virgin Mary had smiled and spoken words that both comforted and puzzled him. "Your anger opened a door that needed to be opened, but every door that opens for divine purpose must also know when to close." As Marcus drifted towards sleep that night, one question burned in his mind with an intensity that made his heart race. Was the Virgin Mary preparing to tell him goodbye? And if so, what would happen to a 12-year-old boy who had learned to carry miracles, but had never learned how to let them go? 2 weeks later, on a crisp November morning, Marcus Williams walked through the doors of St. Anthony's Elementary Chapel for the last time, as the boy who spoke to the Virgin Mary in his dreams. The night before, she had come to him one final time, not with visions of danger, but with a message of completion filled his heart with both sadness and profound peace. The chapel was exactly as he had seen it in his final dream, filled with golden morning light streaming through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the marble statue he had once tried to destroy. The statue stood unmarked, unchanged, but somehow it seemed to radiate a warmth that hadn't been there before, as if his act of rage had opened a door that needed to be opened. Marcus approached the statue slowly, carrying a single white rose that his mother had given him. "For saying goodbye," Carmen had whispered as she'd placed it in his hands. The past 2 weeks had brought miraculous changes to their family. An anonymous benefactor had paid off all their bills. Carmen had been offered a better-paying job, and their landlord had decided not to raise their rent. The Virgin Mary's promise that help would come in unexpected ways had proven true. As Marcus placed the white rose at the statue's base, he whispered the words she had spoken to him. Thank you for choosing me when I was angry. Thank you for showing me that love is stronger than rage and that protecting others is more important than my own hurt." The gentle voice came one last time, not in a dream, but in the quiet stillness of his heart. "Your anger opened the door, but your love kept it open. The miracles were never yours to carry forever. They were gifts to show you who you were meant to become. Now you can be a child again, but a child who knows that even in the darkest moments, you are never truly alone." Marcus felt the familiar warmth spread through his chest one final time, and then it was gone. Not taken away, but transformed into something deeper. The dreams of danger would not come again, but the memory of divine love would guide every choice he made for the rest of his life. Sister Catherine found him there 20 minutes later, kneeling in peaceful prayer before the statue. She could see in his face that a chapter had closed and a new one was beginning. The boy who had tried to break the statue in rage had become the boy who could leave it in love. If this story moved you, subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries so you never miss the next chapter in these extraordinary mysteries. Marcus Williams grew up to become a paramedic, spending his life protecting others in ways both ordinary and extraordinary. And sometimes, when he saves a life in those critical moments that balance between despair and hope, witnesses swear they can smell the impossible scent of roses. Before you leave, I want you to write one phrase in the comments that this story has placed in your heart. Sacred protection. Let these words become a prayer chain, connecting all of us who believe that miracles still happen when we need them most.